Of all the women who surrounded Charles II, there was only one who cared anything for him or for England. The rest were all either selfish or treacherous or base. This one exception has been so greatly written of, both in fiction and in history, as to make it seem almost unnecessary to add another word. Yet it may well be worthwhile to separate the fiction from the fact and to see how much of the legend of Nell Gwynn is true. The fanciful story of her birthplace is most surely quite unfounded. She was not the daughter of a Welsh officer but of two petty hucksters who had their booth in the lowest precincts of London. In those days, the Strand was partly open country, and as it neared the city it showed the mansions of the gentry set in their green-walled parks. At one end of the Strand, however, was Drury Lane, then the haunt of criminals and every kind of wretch, while nearer still was the notorious Coal Yard, where no citizen dared go unarmed. Within this dreadful place, children were kidnapped and trained to various forms of vice. It was a school for murderers and robbers and prostitutes, and every night when the torches flared, it vomited forth its deadly spawn. Here was the earliest home of Nell Gwynn, and out of this den of iniquity, she came at night to sell oranges at the entrance to the theatres. She was stage-struck and endeavoured to get even a minor part in a play. But Betterton, the famous actor, thrust her aside when she ventured to apply to him. It must be said that in everything that was external except her beauty, she fell short of a fastidious taste. She was intensely ignorant, even for that time. She spoke in a broad Cockney dialect. She had lived the life of the coal yard, and like Zola's Nana, she could never remember the time when she had known the meaning of chastity. Nell Gwynn was, in fact, a product of the vilest slums of London, and precisely because she was this, we must set her down as intrinsically a good woman, one of the truest, frankest, and most right-minded of whom the history of such women has anything to tell. All that external circumstances could do to push her down into the mire was done, yet she was not pushed down, but emerged as one of those rare souls who have in their natures an uncontaminated spring of goodness and honesty. Charles is said first to have met her when he, incognito, with another friend, was making the rounds of the theatres at night. The king spied her glowing, nut-brown face in one of the boxes and, forgetting his incognito, went up and joined her. She was with her protector of the time, Lord Buckhurst, who, of course, recognized His Majesty. Presently the whole party went out to a neighbouring coffee-house where they drank and ate together. When it came time to pay the reckoning, the king found that he had no money, nor had his friend. Lord Buckhurst, therefore, paid the bill, while Mistress Nell jeered at the other two, saying that this was the most poverty-stricken party that she had ever met. Charles did not lose sight of her. Her frankness and honest manner pleased him. There came a time when she was known to be a mistress of the king, and she bore a son who was ennobled as the Duke of St. Albans, but who did not live to middle age. Nell Gwynn was much with Charles, and after his tempestuous scenes with Barbara Villiers and the feeling of dishonour which the Duchess of Portsmouth made him experience, the girl's good English bluntness was a pleasure far more rare than sentiment. She saw enough of Charles, and she liked him well enough to wish that he might do his duty by his people, and she alone had the boldness to speak out what she thought. One day, she found him lolling in an armchair and complaining that the people were not satisfied. "You can very easily satisfy them," said Nell Gwynn. "Dismiss your women and attend to the proper business of a king." Again, her heart was touched at the misfortunes of the old soldiers who had fought for Charles and for his father during the Civil War, and who were now neglected, while the treasury was emptied for French favourites, and while the policy of England itself was bought and sold in France. Many and many a time, when other women of her kind used their lures to get jewels or titles or estates or actual heaps of money, Nell Gwynn besought the king to aid these needy veterans. Because of her efforts, Chelsea Hospital was founded. Such money as she had she shared with the poor and with those who had fought for her royal lover. Of anecdotes concerning her there are many, but not often has their real import been detected. If she could twine her arms about the monarch's neck and transport him in a delirium of passion, this was only part of what she did. She tried to keep him right and true and worthy of his rank, and after he had ceased to care much for her as a lover, he remembered that she had been faithful in many other things. Then there came the deathbed scene, when Charles, in his inimitable manner, apologized to those about him because he was so long in dying. A far sincerer sentence was that which came from his heart as he cried out in the very pangs of death, "Do not let poor Nellie starve."